All right, folks, well, I've got all of the main components of my cabinet or box cut out, ripped to size, cut to length, all the good stuff. So I got all my pieces here at the table, and to kind of start to put this thing together, I'm going to be using a domino. Now, I understand that probably most of y'all don't have dominoes, but if you're wondering what a domino is, this is a domino machine. This is a domino. So it's kind of like a fake tenon or mortise and tenon joint. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's just easier to dry fit this box together to make sure I've got all the dimensions right. And then I'll take it apart and glue it and even put in a few screws to make it super sturdy. But you definitely don't have to have a domino. You can just use screws. You can use pocket screws. There's a lot of ways to put together a box, but this is how I'm going to be using it. And I'm going to be putting it on my little air clamp over here, and I'll time lapse the whole boring process of making domino holes. So first thing is, I've got to get all the domino holes put in all of these pieces and then put the box together, and I'll show you folks what's going to be next. Okay, folks, so it's a box. That's really all it is. I went ahead and glued and screwed it off camera because there's really nothing to actually making a box, but this is kind of the thought process that I'm going through as I build this. I'll probably tweak a few of these design features as I move along, but this is why I'm building it this way. So as I mentioned before, I will be using this Goal Zero power station most of the time in my truck, so I wanted a dedicated space to keep this power station. I did go ahead and drill some holes for ventilation. I don't know if you'll be able to see them, but there's some holes in here and there's some holes on the side right here that's going to allow that cross flow to, you know, if this battery ever runs very high. I don't anticipate ever using it above maybe 200 watts max, but in the event that I have to, it will have some cross flow. This portion right here is where I'm going to put a kind of a false inset front, and so I can take it off because all of my wiring is going to be in this cubby. So in the event I ever do have to go check wiring, I can just pull it out and look at the wiring. Next step along the way on this build is really kind of trying to figure out the wiring and getting this false front made, and I'll walk you through that. So we've gotten a little bit further in the construction of this little box here, and I kind of wanted to show you where I'm at now before I really start the wiring because it's going to get kind of messy. So I'm going to pull you in a little bit closer so you can see what I have in there right now, and as well as this little panel that I built for my switches. So again, remember, this is where my Goal Zero, my power station, is going to be sitting, and this section right here is all for my wiring. So the only thing that I have in there right now is a little 150 watt AC to DC converter, and I've got a fuse panel that is tied into right now. That's all that is right now. I have no other wiring. And this section right here is going to have a removable faceplate that's going to have all of my switches, which is this right here. So I went ahead and cut it, and I installed the switches just to make sure that it fit, and that's all it is. So I installed a couple of little braces right here that I'm going to actually screw this into when it's all said and done, but it's just going to fit right there. And this way, if I ever do have wiring issues, I can just simply take out a couple of screws and pull this out and get to all of my wiring. The next step is to connect all of these switches, run what I have to the fuse block, And speaking of the fuse block, the only reason I have that fuse block is because these two outputs down here are going to actually run off of shore power. So I've got a couple of quick charge USBs and I've got a 12 volt cigarette style output as well. So if I do ever get to camp and I can plug in a shore power, this little converter right here is going to be able to power just these two. These are not going to run off my battery, so they're going to be wired completely separate from this switch panel. And this switch panel is going to be tied directly into my battery. But I'll go over all the wiring when it's all said and done, but I just wanted to show you folks what it looks like right now before it becomes a rat's nest in there. Hey gang, so okay, I'm getting a little carried away with the wiring, so I want to show you where I'm at as of right now before I actually start putting this box together, because it's going to be kind of hard to show you what it looks like when everything's in this little cubby hole. So let me turn the camera around and show you where we got. Okay, so this right here is going to be the front panel that goes right here, and I went ahead and carpeted it just using regular spray adhesive. It holds just fine. Now, flipping this over, you can see here, this is going to be my main power cord that I'm going to fish through this hole back in here and pull it out and connect it to my Goal Zero. So that's what this is. And the function of this is to power all three of these switches. So I have this cord basically pigtailed into the power prong on all three of these switches. So when I turn my Goal Zero on, it's going to send power through this cord and power the switches. Now for my accessories coming out, for my lights that I'm going to use to hook up to these switches, I just installed 3 separate power leads coming out of the accessory prong on those switches, and they're all coming out here, and they terminate to 3 barrel adapters. Now I was going to use XT60 connectors, but things changed, so this is going to come out the back of my cabinet to use as kind of like a quick disconnect. That I'm going to plug in all of my accessories into these barrel adapters, so when I need to move this cabinet out, all I have to do is unplug these. I don't have to reach in here and unplug anything. So that's why that's there. Now as far as the ground, it's basically the same thing with a little change. So I got the ground coming off of this power lead. I got it pigtailed into the ground side of the prongs, but then I do have one more extra pigtail coming out to this thing. This is a 1-in-3 wire splitter, basically. So this is going to be my ground, and I'm going to install this somewhere in this area. So all you do on this thing is you open up these little levers and you stick your wire in through those holes, and then you push down these levers and it locks it into place. So for all of my ground wires on all of my accessories inside my truck, all of my lights, I'm going to run the ground wire into here, and that way when I do have to disconnect, I just simply flip these things up. My ground wire is now free and clear, and then I have to undo my power leads from the barrel connectors. So everything can be disconnected from the back of the unit and leave really no wires behind. This whole thing is going to come out. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of drawers in here. I'm going to get this box carpeted with speaker box carpet, which is what I got right here. That's all that I'm using. And then I'm going to get this front cover semi-permanently installed. I'm just going to screw one screw here and one screw down at the bottom, and those screws are going to tap into these little braces that I put. So that is it. That is where I am at now currently with my little cabinet for my truck build. So I will check back in here in a few more days when I have it a little bit more on the completed side, and hopefully we'll be able to get it in my truck for the next camping trip sometime next week. So stay tuned, folks. Thanks. So here's the stage we're at now. I went ahead and installed the speaker box carpet using just standard Gorilla spray adhesive glue. Spray that on the wood and the carpet, let it get tacky, then put the carpet on and kind of roll it out and get it stuck on nice and good. I did go ahead and paint the inside of it black just to make it look a little bit nicer. And you can see the switch panel up here is now installed. Gone ahead and just constructed a very, very simple drawer box. And I installed this little hardy board material on the back for the floor of the drawer. So now all I got to do is get that drawer into that space and get the drawer slides screwed on. So to get this drawer installed and have it not rub on the bottom of this, I'm going to put in some little 1/4-inch spacers and set the drawer box on top of that. The front of the drawer is flush with the end of the drawer slide rails. there we go. Perfect. So I did inset these drawer slides 3/4 of an inch in, because I am going to install a false front or a drawer front on this cabinet, and I'm going to go ahead and put the carpeting on the front of that drawer front. So I got to go get that built. And then I'm going to actually put in a small little tiny tray that's going to come out that I'm going to use to put my drinks on or my iPad or whatever, but I'll show that to you folks when I'm done. But it's the same process as putting in this drawer box. So the cabinet is now complete. I got a few more little odds and ends and tweaks to do on it, but I could put this thing in my truck tonight and it would be ready to go. So I'm going to spin you around and kind of walk you through as much as I can. And if you have any questions about it, just shoot me a comment, because I'm sure I'm going to miss a few things. But here is basically the finished product. So again, I kind of built this cabinet to house this Goal Zero for the power station that I'm going to be using in the back of my truck. And this is going to be the main power to my whole entire system, is this Anderson input. So once we plug this thing up, now all of these switches will work. Obviously, I don't have anything plugged into them, but this power station is now providing power to these switches, of which these switches will then turn around and provide power to all the lights in my truck. So we'll turn these off. And these down here are actually tied into my converter that I showed you guys at the beginning of this video. So I've got my quick charge USB ports and my 12-volt cigarette style. And I picked this port because of my 12-volt heated blanket. So when I am plugged into shore power, I can plug in my heated blanket and last all night long and not waste my battery station with that 12-volt outlet. It actually, that converter is plugged in right now. So when I get to camp and I have shore power, this is going to be plugged into my shore power inside the back of my truck, which is going to power these two ports. And if you see this came from an amazing subscriber. I was pleasantly shocked that he offered to make this for me. So this is a CNC'd logo of mine and with an inlay. So this thing is just absolutely amazing. So thank you so much, Terry. I do really, really appreciate it. And it's basically my drawer pull. So this is going to be the big drawer for whatever I decide to put in it. And this up here is going to kind of be my iPad slash beverage station slash just extra some place to put things on top of. Like my drinks, my iPad when I'm laying down, just, you know, just an extra little shelf that I kind of wanted to put in this truck. So that's basically it, folks. Let me show you around the back. So again, this is kind of all the wiring. So remember, this fuse panel is only there to provide power to those two ports, to these two lower ports down here for my quick charge USBs and my 12-volt cigarette style port. And the little converter here is just tied into the fuse panel. And then again, when I get to shore power, when I get to camp that's got shore power, I can just plug this into my truck, which does have shore power again, and it'll power those without wasting any of the battery juice out of my Goal Zero. And then the ground are all going to go into one of these three ports right here, because this is tied into the ground to my switches. So that's about it, folks. I know you could probably just use plastic containers, or you don't even really need to build a cabinet, but when I'm in my truck at night, this thing's kind of like the little heart of the truck with the battery station, the switches. All of my stuff stays in this main drawer, so I really wanted to spend time and make this thing as nice as I could, because, you know, I sit and stare at it all night long. So that's kind of why I kind of went overboard on this thing, but I really enjoyed my last cabinet and I wanted to build this one even better. And as usual, I'll try to remember to put everything that I used in this cabinet in the description below. The wiring harnesses, the taps, the switches, the carpet, everything if I can remember it. And if I miss something, you guys just leave me a comment if you're curious about what it is or where I got it. I'll go back in and add it. Next thing to do is actually put this thing in my truck and finally put it to good use. So that's a wrap for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care.